Okay, today I want to talk about strengths versus superpowers. I see a lot of posts about parents posting that their kids have superpowers, they're autistic and have different superpowers. And then I see the other side where people talk about that that's a negative thing, saying somebody has a superpower. And then they're comparing the idea of talking about strengths and talking about superpowers. And then I can't help but think that when someone talks about those two topics in a negative way, is because maybe they're viewing it as an expectation. So, in terms of making sense of autism and our framework of neuro strengths, I want you to kind of talk about how it's not a negative thing, how it's different from that whole idea of a superpower, and how it's not an expectation. How we view strengths is not an expectation at all. So I want you to kind of talk about that.
Okay, let me start by saying everyone, absolutely everyone has strengths of some kind, as well as limitations. When you start talking superpowers, and depending on who's talking about it, if it's the individual, they're looking at their strengths as superpowers because they're trying to overcome the negative view that they have deficits. And so I think they are calling their strengths superpowers to build up their self-esteem, self-confidence. Now, if it's someone else that's talking about an autistic having superpowers, then I think you're probably right. They're looking at it as, see what they can do. They have these superpowers, but that builds in the idea of expectations that you're always going to have those powers. They're always available to you. And yet, as research has easily pointed out, the autistic brain is inconsistent in its ability to make connections. So we can sometimes use those superpowers come charging through, and other times not. And even our arousal level can fluctuate. So we may not be up to using our superpowers at any given time, versus other times when our energy levels are really low. So, yeah, superpowers make it sound like you always have them.
Mhm.
And that's not true. Whereas strengths, you can always pull from them as a resource, but it doesn't have the same connotation of saying, yeah, you have a strength in this area, but saying you have a superpower, it goes beyond. And that's not a fair terminology. And I can understand an autistic individual using those terms to compensate, to make it sound as though um, uh, I can even go beyond what normal people can and do in strengths, which is to some degree true. I mean, some autistics can do things that other autistics can't because they do have this genius ability. Um, but I just really don't recommend the superpowers can misunderstood,
Yeah.
whereas everyone has strengths.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. We've talked a lot about those expectations, and I even see it with my clients. And I think that is a really confusing thing for non-autistics, as well as therapists and parents, because when we see an individual do something, or we see an individual as very intelligent, that expectation is always there. And I almost think this falls under the whole neurodivergent umbrella, because I feel like this applies to ADHDers as well, and pulling that information. Because you're right, we often hear, but you're so smart, or you did that yesterday, or I oftentimes hear from parents, you know, you did that, you went on vacation and you did great last time, why was this time, and so those expectations, and we've talked a little bit about this with other topics, but how can parents shift their mindset to not create those expectations? Or how can they shift even what they say to their child so that it doesn't become an expectation? Like, for example, I've got a client where when praise is given, then
Mm.
sometimes it's that expectation. So what do you recommend to parents?
Oh yeah, I hated when parents would praise me because, well, number one, they would generally only praise me for things that they thought I did that they wanted me to do, as opposed to praising me for the person I am. So it was more a reflection of their expectations and my meeting them than it was a recognition of an actual strength that I perceive that I have and can rely on and use. Um, but this is why we use the term neurostrengths. We have to remember we have neurological differences in the way that we're able to use those strengths. Sometimes they do become to the level of superpowers. I mean, man, we can pull things together and it's amazing. But on other times, the strength is still there, but we may not have the energy to deal with it. We're just not making the connections. We're overwhelmed at this point. We have to understand, parents have to understand the neurological differences in the way we can use those strengths. And which is why the first question asked is, are you up to it? Are you ready? That would be the key things to ask. Here's what I need or want from you. Are you up to it? Are you ready? If not, what do we need to do to get ready?
And I love what you said about how it's that point of view of, am I praising you because you did what I wanted you to do, or am I praising you for your effort? Am I praising you for your strength? I love that. And I think that's how, as all parents, we can kind of shift that as well. And then that talks about the whole compliance thing, which is another topic for another day.
Yep, I agree.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.